So we all know the 80-20 principle, right? What are 20% of the tasks and actions that drive 80% of the results we get, right? The Pareto principle. So I always thought about in the context of life. Like, what are 20% of the questions that we can ask ourselves as human beings that lead to 80% of the clarity in one's life? So, obviously, this is still a work in progress. I'm not some guru, but here's a couple of questions that I think really cut through the fat around what actually matters in life.
Welcome to Influence. This is a podcast where we interview YouTubers and extraordinary entrepreneurs so we can all learn from the journeys that they've been on. Today's episode, we had Brenden Kumarasami. Brenden is a master of communication. During our conversation, he just leaves a ton of tips and advice for anybody who wants to take their communication to the next level. So if that's you, you're going to truly enjoy the show. Brenden Kumarasamy, welcome to Influence, sir.
Hey, it's good to be here, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to get things started with talking with you a little bit about your YouTube channel. For those that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your channel and what it is that you teach?
So, I'm the founder of Master Talks, a YouTube channel I started on communication and public speaking. And how I got started, Brian, was when I was in university, college. I went to business school. And I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So all the guys my age were like playing rugby or football or some other sport you probably wouldn't see me playing. I was doing presentations for nerds. I mean, that's basically what I was doing competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started to coach a lot of the students, not really for money. It's because the alternative they had was nobody, so I just kind of figured out how to coach people. And that's what led to the YouTube channel because I felt that everything I was sharing with them wasn't really available online on the internet, and then one thing led to another, and here we are today.
So can you go into a little bit about what it is specifically that you found yourself teaching them? Like what were they struggling with?
Yeah, for sure. So let me start the context first. What is a case competition? So essentially what that is think of it like me and you are in the same team, Brian, and Nike comes up to us, the shoe company obviously, and says, "Hey, I'm thinking about opening a new store, Brian and Brendan. Should I do it in Utah? Should I open it in Salt Lake City? Or should I open it in Berlin in Germany? But I only have enough money for one of the stores. So where should I open it?" So what students do, Brian, is they have 3 hours to read a 20-page document about Nike's history, their financials, their decision-making process, and then we have to pick one of the stores, and then we have to come up as to why we think that one's better than the other. We come up with the solution, risks assessment, money, finances, like we do the whole thing. And at the end of the 3 hours, we have to present our solution back to the executives of the company, and the winner wins the competition, the person who has the best solution. So now the follow-up question that you probably are thinking of is why would anyone put themselves through this? The reason is because it's a recruitment tool for the best companies in the world. So what a lot of these people do, a lot of these execs, is they sponsor these competitions. They come to them as hosts and judges, and they pick out and pluck out the best students and give them jobs. Think of it like a sports draft, but for business students. So that's the context. Now, in terms of what I was teaching them was specifically how to win those competitions. So I'll give you an example, and that kind of developed my expertise from there as a baseline. Where instead of saying like just ums and ahs, I was saying something like, instead of when you're speaking to Walmart, don't say, "Hey guys, this is Brendan, this is Brian, we're talking to Walmart," and they would start like this. When I was 5 years old, I loved going to Walmart, and they kind of butter up the judges.
So how is it that you got into doing that? Like what drove you to start doing that yourself and how did you get so good?
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it, man. And I still have a lot more to go, but I think for me, it wasn't really about this sob story, this incredible way of a passion I always had for communication. The reason I actually did them in the first place was to get a job. So when I was 19 years old, I had like this oversized suit. I didn't know anyone in the business world. My parents were factory workers. So I never saw entrepreneurship as the way. I'm like the first guy in my lineage of families to have a university degree. So I wasn't going to waste it to be a business owner. There's so much risk in that. So I wanted to be an accountant actually. That's what I studied. So I wanted to work at one of the big four accounting firms like PwC and Deloitte and Ernst& Young. So I went to a lot of these networking cocktails with people who are 2 years older than me who had internships at these companies and were going to work there full time. So they were basically my dream. And then I went up to them and I'd say, "How did you get the job?" And they all said two words: case competitions. And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And then I learned what they were. and I saw it as my ticket out of poverty. I didn't see it as a vehicle to explore my passion, to be this exceptional communicator, and then coach all of these people. That was never the goal. It was really like, how do I win these things, get the judge's attention, and retire my mom, frankly, because I'm tired of her working in a factory. So that's what happened, and then it accidentally led into me developing an unhealthy obsession with communication because I started to get obsessed with these cases, and that's what skyrocketed my communication growth.
So, what was your first experience with like an aha moment in communication? Like, what was the first time you got like a piece of advice or heard a technique and you were like, "Wow, like this changes the game for me."
Yeah, for sure. I would say the first lesson, it's a simple one, but it's one I learned the hard way, which is understand your audience. So when I was 19, I did my first ever case competition. We presented in front of the one of the world's largest packaging companies. So think of like, Oasis Juice, like the person who packages that Oasis box was like one of the case people. But what they didn't tell us was that the managing director of the whole country was one of the judges. And I was like, geez. And this is like my first case. So me and my buddies were coming up with ideas, and we were given like a week. This is like a very unique case. Normally you have 3 hours, but we were given a week. So we said, how can we really stand out? Because we didn't know anything about business. It was our first case competition, and I've done like 60 of them when I was in university. That was my first one. So we had the idea of coming up with a commercial. It's like, let's do like a commercial and like send them the video and they'll be blown away. And the guy loved it, except one problem. And the problem was we used a competitor's packaging in the commercial by accident. So we still got third place, but the director looked at us and he said, guys, you have to really understand who you're speaking to. It's okay with us, but when you get into the real world, you have to really learn that. And I've always had that in mind.
So, knowing your audience, knowing who you're speaking to, I think really translate into a lot of different areas in business and in when you're trying to grow, a YouTube channel. It's really about knowing your audience. So, what advice would you give to somebody that's really trying to figure out who their audience is and how to communicate to them?
For sure. So there's two parts to that. The one part is like how do we appeal more to our audience? The other part is how do we communicate more effectively in general to attract that audience. So this is a framework I teach people called QIT. Questions, insights, titles. So let's start with Q, Brian. So Q just means what questions do people ask you? So for example, when I started Master Talk in my mom's basement, which I still live in by the way, even if I have a pretty successful business now, but back then I was just there and broke. And a lot of the focus was, what are people asking me? So I would use a lot of the questions that the 60 people I had coached from like 19 to 22 years old, they just feed me. How do I present in a second language? How do I remove my filler words? So that's the first part of the framework. Just make a list of all the questions that 10 people are asking you. It doesn't have to be 10,000, just for the 5 to 10 people who would watch anything that you post, like family members and stuff or friends. The second part of the framework is insights. Every day, take one of those questions and block off an hour in your day and think deeply about that question. If you could only answer that question once, and that was the only answer we would have, what would you come up with? So you wouldn't just say, like, oh, present it for a second, like, just practice. Like, you wouldn't just say that. You would actually spend the time and say, what am I missing here that a wiser person would see? Okay, let me focus on developing an answer. And it won't be your best one in your career, it'll be the best one you have today. Like, I would change all my videos now. Now, and the person 3 years from now will change everything that I'm saying on this podcast. So that's the second part. And then the third part is just T, which is titles. So now what that means is take the questions and transform them into titles. Let me give you an example. One question I get a lot is how do I present in a second language? So that would title on a YouTube channel, on any video, any piece of content as how to present in a second language. So that way people click the video and they want to watch it. And then the other piece is how to communicate, which we'll talk about later for sure.
So, for somebody who, let's say they're completely blank as far as questions go, they don't really even have a list or even have an idea, how would they go about getting those questions?
There's kind of two trains of thought I would have. The first one is like, then why are we creating content? Like, what's the purpose behind it? Like, I never wanted to be a YouTuber. That was never my intention. And to be quite frank, I'm pretty like off the record when I talk. Like, I'm sorry, I'm pretty upfront. Like, I thought YouTubers were like for white rich people. Like, I didn't think I would be like a content creator. That was never like my goal. I was supposed to work at like an IBM, and I worked there for 2.5 years, be an executive there, make a good amount of money, and just call it a day. So I wasn't looking to be a YouTuber, Brian. But what happened is destiny chose me to be a content creator because they told me basically in one way, shape, or another that, hey, Brenden, you're the only one who cares about sharing this stuff for free at this age group. So you might as well do it because nobody else is doing it. And that's what led me to Master Doc. So questions actually need to lead you into the purpose. If nobody's asking you questions about anything, then what are we creating content on? So that's the one piece I would challenge. But then the other piece is, no, Brenden, I actually have something I want to teach. I just don't know where the questions are coming from. Then the answer is really simple. You're just not having enough dinners with the people you actually want to communicate your ideas to. Example. When I started Master Talk, I already had a group of like 5, 10 people that I knew would watch my stuff, even if it was terrible, because they just loved me for 3 years. So I would have dinners with them, and I still have them, and would ask them questions like, if you're in my shoes, how would you communicate my ideas better? What are some of the challenges you're having right now? And these are not Zoom calls, these are not text messages, these are not Google Forms. This is actual dinner, Brian. Like actual in-person 3 to 6 hour dinner where you're sitting with the person you actually want to help. So if you don't have any ideas around content, literally sit down with the person that you want to help, that you're excited about serving, and just ask them and that's what comes up with the ideas. I mean, one of the dinners I had, somebody said, hey Brenden, why didn't you like break down speakers like Gary Vaynerchuk or Lewis Howes and create videos around? And I looked at the guy and I said, huh, I probably should have thought of that one myself. And I just started making videos on that. So that's the key. We shouldn't guess, we should just ask.
So when it comes to the videos that you are doing, are the most popular ones the ones that you post of you breaking down speakers, or is there just another segment that you find people find very attractive to learn?
I think it's more of a principle, Brian. It's a great question. I would say for me, what I learned is you can never really guess what people resonate with. I mean, Gary Vee says it in a more aggressive way, but I can add more detail. He says like quantity over quality, quantity over quality. Basically, what he says, what he means in layman terms, is that the only way to figure out what your audience is attracted by is just by posting a lot of content, so you can see the data. Like one of my videos blew up on YouTube called 3 Daily Public Speaking Exercises, and I never knew that was the one. That was like the third video I had produced professionally, and then, like half of my face is like dark, the other face has lighting. It still looks good, but I never thought that was the one. And my videos on how to present like different speakers actually doesn't even get that much traction. I would say most of them are like the how-to videos are the ones that do the best on my channel. But I just don't want to make every video that way, which is more creativity versus maximizing audience growth. But I think the point I want to drive is that you need to be willing to ask and be curious. Another piece that a lot of people don't know about my content strategy is I actually think about my content years in advance. So all of my content for 2023, Brian, is actually already done. I'm thinking about 2024 right now. So I have a list of topics that I'm writing on. My goal is to finish writing 2024 before the end of this year so I can start producing that in 2023, which is a very different strategy than most people have for their YouTube channels. But I think the key is just ask and you'll receive.
I'll be honest, I don't know that I have more than like a 24-hour distance between when I'm going to post or what I'm going to post. I would love to hear a little bit of insight if you don't mind sharing. What is it that you do to really give yourself a very long runway of content that you're going to be posting?
For sure, Brian. Always happy to share. Always happy to share. And another piece around conversation that I think is important to point out for everyone listening is this very conversation that we're having right now. Think about me. I'm investing 45 minutes because I really believe in you and your mission and your message. But notice how, because I'm talking to you directly, the impression you have of me before and after is very different. Because you might watch my YouTube video and say, oh, this is really good content, but he's got a suit on. Like maybe he's this, maybe he's that. But then you meet me and you're like, but I'm not saying you thought that or by any means. But then you meet me, you're like, oh, this guy's like really chilled out. He's really casual. I actually really like this guy. So I'm gonna share his YouTube videos with 25 of my friends. So even today, and that's why Gary Vee was way more successful than I am. He's always always investing in those conversations because that's the stuff that gets you new insights and ideas. In terms of content creation, let's start from the beginning, Brian. This is a principle I hold that most content creators just don't have, and that's why I think I've been successful relative to my age in this industry. Since you know the space really well, most people in my industry are way older than me. They're in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and I've been able to outpace a good number of them this very quickly. And I think the answer is simply this: think about your brand in decades, not days. Too many content creators are thinking about what's hot versus what will last. They're thinking about what's casual, what's fast versus what's the marriage that's going to last 30 years. And what I mean here specifically is most people right now they go, okay, well, TikTok's hot. Well, LinkedIn's hot. So I'm just going to post on LinkedIn and TikTok or Instagram or something versus going like, what do I want my brand to look like 10 years from now? Think about Seth Godin. He's literally been posting a blog every single day. No one would recommend blogging today, but he's been posting a blog every single day since like the dawn of the internet, like literally since the dawn of the beginning, and he hasn't missed in like 32 years. Isn't that insane? So I think for me, the question has always been, what is the 10-year game? So with YouTube, my content strategy specifically is forget about like current events. I literally looked at my life and I said, okay, 520 to win. What does that mean? If I post a video every week for the next 10 years and I don't miss for 10 years, I'll have one of the biggest YouTube channels on communication and public speaking. So for me, it's always been about how do I optimize for those 520 videos. So now let's do the math. If I create one script every day for a year, I'll have 365 videos, which means I'll have content for 7 years. So I think that's the mindset that a lot of people don't have. The other piece around content creation that's more for short term is a simple concept called post once, create twice. So what does that mean? Let's say we take daily on LinkedIn, which is a lot easier to post content on consistently. So if you create two pieces of content, but you only post one of them and you do a little bit of that every day for a year, you'll be 6 months ahead of your content strategy. And if you do that for 10 years, you'll be 5 years ahead of your content strategy. In other words, it takes a little bit to stand out, but most people aren't willing to go the little extra mile.
So when you post once and create twice, do you just take that second created post and just put it into a folder for a future post? Like, okay, I'm going to start dipping into this in 6 months once I have a nice reserve built up.
Exactly. And let me add more granular. I love the follow up questions. So let me give you an example. Let's say on my laptop right now as we're talking, I have 2023 for LinkedIn, and every day is a folder. January 1st, 2023, this post. So, like, Monday would be my video post that I repurpose from YouTube. Tuesday is my client testimonial post from like a client of them speaking really well. Wednesdays repurpose YouTube. Fridays repurpose YouTube. Thursday is a promo. So I'll pick like the 50 best podcasts that I was on in that given year, and I'll only promote those 50, and they'll be my Thursday. Like whoever sends me the best clips, basically. Then Saturday is going to be the poll post. I'm just going to put a LinkedIn poll for about something, and Sunday is going to be present like X speaker. So I actually follow that exact same formula. It just people don't realize it because it's daily posting on LinkedIn, and that's how I do it ahead of time. Yeah.
So I'm listening to your strategy. I'm listening to your approach, and it sounds a lot, and it is. But I've got to know, do you have software that's helping you get all these posts out, or are you going in there and just manually getting your posts done? What's your strategy there?
Right. So you'd be surprised to know that I actually do all of this manually with one exception. And the exception is YouTube because YouTube is awesome. So it allows me to automate content posts without me having to do it, which I'm shocked none of the other platforms do, which is a side note, but we don't need to go into rant today. I would say for LinkedIn though, but it's not as automated as you think it is. So I'm sure there's software that I could do this faster, but I think the most important thing I want to not leave people with, we're still here, but I mean that I want people to take away from this conversation we're having right now is the most important thing is, are you consistent? That's the only thing. Like if you have the best content in the world every day for 30 days and you just stop posting, you're not relevant on social media. Versus on YouTube, if you just post once a week for a decade and that's all you do, because so many people have told me to post twice a week, 3 times. I was like, yeah, but that's gonna triple my production costs, and it's gonna cost me so much money to get all these videos. I'm already spending 5 figures on prod. It's like, no, I'm just gonna burn out, and it won't be fun anymore. Whereas now, I haven't written a script in 6 months. Actually, that's not true. I started writing like 3 months ago. But before that, I hadn't written something in 6 months. But who cares? All my content's been done, so I have that creative freedom. So that's why I would say around that piece. But around LinkedIn specifically, what I'll say is it's actually not that bad because my Word document is actually formatted for LinkedIn. So when I wake up every morning, it's a 30-second exercise. I open the folder for the day, let's say October 10th, 2022, the day we're recording this, and then I'll Control V, Control C, I'll copy what's in the Word doc. It's literally a paste. And then I just have the attached video next to it, and that's it. It's literally done in a minute or so.
I'm picking up a very strong character trait within you, and that's someone who is very disciplined and is able to stay consistent and has a plan for how they're going to approach and making their future happen. I'd love to ask, like, is there anything that you do that really keeps you in that sort of like momentum forward moving, space? Like anything that even helps you get through the times where you're just like, I'm not in the mood to do this today.
Yeah, for sure, Brian. I would say for me, and everyone's wired differently, but I would say the biggest thing, there's a lot of things I'm not doing, right? Let me call myself out on a few of them because we're fixing that this month. Getting on TikTok and Instagram, so we're producing a bunch of stuff for that I haven't been doing. And a lot of my buddies have done really well on those platforms, and I was just lazy. So there's some things I've done really well, and there's some things I haven't. It's just also about self-reflection and getting better at it. But I think for me, the big thing that keeps me going is two things. One is my why, which I'm happy to share through a story, and the other piece is an exercise I recommend everyone listening to do. So let's start the questions, and then after all, I'm happy to share the story. So I call this 80-20 questions, Brian. So we all know the 80-20 principle, right? What are 80%, what are 20% of the tasks and actions that drive 80% of the results we get, right? The Pareto principle. So I always thought about in the context of life. Like, what are 20% of the questions that we can ask ourselves as human beings that lead to 80% of the clarity in one's life? So, obviously, this is still a work in progress. I'm not some guru, but here's a couple of questions that I think really cut through the fat around what actually matters in life. And I'm still reworking this list, but I'll give you a couple. One, if you had all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? So all of us are trying to retire for 65. If I made you retire now, what would you do with your time for the rest of your life? And that helps you get more focused. Question two. If you could only accomplish 3 things in your life, and only three, what would you want those 3 things to be and why? So what this does is it helps you really focus in on what are the 3 actual things that I want to be working on instead of focusing on 100 different things. And question number three that I got from Devon Bandison, the question is, what is a goal or a dream that you secretly gave up on and never told anyone about? So really start asking yourself these questions. Tony Robbins says it best, Brian. If you the quality of your life is solely determined by the quality of the questions that you ask yourself about life. My version of that of Tony's quote is I dare all of you to ask yourself one hard question about life because if you did that for 30 days, you'll never be the same ever again. Which ties finally into my communication why, which I'll explain that I'm happy to. So basically, my communication why is this. It's 2014, and Taylor Swift wins Woman of the Year, Brian. It's like this award that Billboard gives out every year. And she's sitting in the audience. She's standing in the audience, by the way, on the podium, and she's looking at the crowd and saying the following: "Your future Woman of the Year is 11 years old right now. She's in a choir. She's on a piano. She has big dreams to be a singer, and we need to take care of her." And then 6 years flash forward, and Billie Eilish becomes the youngest inductee in Billboard's history to win Woman of the Year at 17. She gets up on that stage, she's rambling, all that stuff, and then the last 30 seconds changes my life. She looks at the crowd and goes, "Oh yeah, like I was watching Taylor Swift's speech in 2014, and I was 11 years old. And I was learning how to sing and do choir, and thank you everyone for taking care of me. And the reason that resonates with me so much, Brian, is because I thought about the next Elon Musk. When Elon was 13 years old in South Africa being abused by his dad, he didn't have a communication coach. He didn't have anybody to help him and support him to get rid of his filler words. And he still became successful. But I thought about the next Elon right now, who's 13 years old, who's 12, might be some girl in Cambodia. What are we doing for her? And I realized in that moment that I was the only human being who even thought about that girl in that context. And that really brings a fire up my ass to take this seriously. I know that was a bit long winded, but I hope that served.
That was a fantastic answer, Brenden, honestly. And just to make sure I understand, a big part of your motivation and your drive and what really keeps you moving forward is knowing what you're doing today and the impact that it's going to have on the future generations that are essentially after you, to really show up for them and to be there for them.
You got it, man. I mean, another way of thinking about this is I get to do the work that Dale Carnegie wasn't able to do. Not because Dale Carnegie was a bad person, the obviously the author of How to Win Friends and Influence People, as you probably know since the podcast is called Influence. But the other piece that I'll add is we don't really know how Dale talks because he was born in an era where speeches weren't really recorded. Maybe you have a resource I missed. Actually, maybe I can ask you about that. But I haven't seen any record. Whereas me, I'm very fortunate where I get to live in an era where my voice can be immortalized. Like it can live forever through the format of a podcast, through a video, through a conversation, and that could last forever. And that's really powerful where I can really democratize communication for the world. And that's really my North Star, Brian. Sure, do I make money? Yeah. Do I have clients? Yeah. Do I transform their lives? Absolutely. But there's a bigger piece to the game, which is they help me fund for my content. I don't need to make YouTube videos anymore. Some of my YouTube videos these days get like 200 views, but I still post every week because it's important for my brain to actually like get squeezed out so that that my knowledge lives somewhere in the ethernets, and that's really important to me whether I make money or not.
That's an unbelievable answer, Brenden. You're a very exquisite guy,
I
and I'm
try, man.
truly enjoying this conversation. I'd like to take the conversation back over to your program. You touched on it a little bit earlier in the show, but I want to expand on it a little bit and ask you, what is it that you have as far as a program for people that are interested in just like working with you or learning communication with you?
For sure, Brian. I'll keep it short because I don't like to talk too much about my programs when I'm on a pod. So here's what I'll say. Come to my free training. You know, I do a free workshop on communication. You can access that at rockstarcommunicator.com. It's a live workshop. It's fun. And if you show up there towards the end, I'll say, you know, you could book a call with me and we could talk to see if you're fit. But I will say that most of the people I do work with, they're A types. So they're people who really want to gun for the game. And I do not coach the way that I'm speaking right now in a podcast. I'm a very chilled out on a podcast. Somebody pays me to help them. It's a very different conversation. So what I'll say is go to the free workshop. You know, it's awesome. It's a lot of great value. And then if you feel called to book a free call with us at the end of that free training, please do, and we can have a further conversation to see if you're fit.
So, as somebody who actually would be interested in booking the free workshop, how would I go about booking it with you?
Yeah, for sure. So all you have to do is go to rockstarcommunicator.com and that will bring you to a sign up page. We do it every month, like twice a month, and these are live interactive workshops. It's not like some recorded webinar and I facilitate it.
Excellent. And I am genuinely curious, like if I'm at the webinar, what is it that you're teaching during that webinar?
Sure.
Like what's the structure of it?
Happy to, Brian. So we talk about three main things, and most of it's RIP, so you'll get that and be able to utilize that. So the first one is communication goal setting. A lot of us have goals for our health or relationships or life, but we don't really have goals for our communication. So in the first 30 to 45 minutes of that presentation, we're really coaching people on their communication goal sheets. So we have them pick three speakers that they admire, a strength and a weakness, and I coach them through their goal sheet to help them think more strategically about where they want to take their communication goals and their communication journey That's the first one. The second piece is how to run executive meetings, whether you're a CEO, an exec, an entrepreneur. Like, how do you show up in those meetings? What's your energy like? And how does that affect your bottom line or your career? And we do a little role play with like two people that we pick from the crowd, and then they just do it in the before and after so people see the difference. And then the third piece is the random word exercise that I'm sure you're familiar with. Since you've clearly done your homework on me, right? Which is you pick a random word like salt shaker or pepper, and you create random presentations out of thin air. So what will happen in that call is you'll actually see me do it, and I'll pick out a few other people to do the exercise with, and that's what the free training is mostly about.
That sounds great. I'm actually looking forward to signing up and checking that out. I'd love to ask you, as a communicator, someone who's learned communication, who are your heroes? Who are the people that have been the biggest influence on you as you've learned to be a better communicator?
So many to count, but I would, if I had to pick somebody other than my mom, because obviously if I pick my mom, you can't do research on my mom, so I'll pick somebody else. I think out of all of them, man, the one that sticks out to me the most is probably Scott Harrison, the CEO of Charity Water. Right, he runs a nonprofit to help people gain access to clean water, and the reason he's a big inspiration for me is it doesn't matter how hard my days get, my life is never as hard as Scott's. And the reason I say that is because he runs a nonprofit. So obviously the guy's super successful. He's raised hundreds of millions of dollars to help people gain access to water. Charity water is like one the gold standard of charities in the world. It's amazing to see what they've done. But it's not run from a capitalistic model, meaning that even if he has all the success, he doesn't have leverage in conversation. So if he meets a billionaire and the billionaire decides to donate $100, instead of being frustrated, he has to just take the $100 into the smile on his face and say, "Hey, thanks so much for contributing to charity water." Whereas for me, with my mission, it's not as hard because coaching is a high margin business and I have a lot of resources to sustain myself to keep my vision going. So he's a reminder for all of us of what the harder thing looks like. And if somebody like him can go from literally getting paid to get people drunk in his 20s, he was a nightclub promoter in New York City, that was how he spent most of his life, to building the largest water charity in America and arguably the world. It's really powerful to see what we can do with our lives too. And there's a quote too I'd love to share. And the quote is simply this: the goal is not to live forever, but rather create something that will.
Gosh, Brenden, what a great quote. I might be putting my foot in my mouth with this next question, but is Charity Water the organization that you can donate your birthday to?
That's correct. So they
That is correct. Okay.
revolutionize. Yeah. So a lot of charities do that too, but Charity Water was the first one to kind of revolutionize that model. Yeah.
They were the pioneers of it. When you said Charity Water, I remember the story about a little girl who donated her birthday and then something tragic happened and then it
Yeah.
just her influence just blew up to this big massive I wouldn't say movement, but just like awareness. And her life essentially her life resulted in it being a huge I guess donation, you could say, for Charity Water.
Absolutely. You definitely nailed it. You're right.
Oh, right on. So I'd like to kind of just take the conversation back over to YouTube a little bit when it comes to communication for those that are on YouTube right now and they're wanting to communicate well with their audience. Other than knowing their audience and know who they're communicating with, do you have any other advice that you would give somebody that's trying to build their influence?
For sure. I would say the first one, a lot of people don't realize I do this on YouTube. All my videos are actually scripted. And the reason they're scripted is because it helps me structure my thoughts more effectively. So one caveat I want to add here, Brian, is I do not use a teleprompter. But so a teleprompter for those who are listening just means you see the camera, but you also see the text as you're speaking. So I actually don't have that, but my text is written out word for word. So what happens is my laptop is next to me, and I record it through 5 different parts. I read it really quick, and then I just do it casually on the camera to get all the main points. And the reason is because the problem with most people on video, Brian, is they ramble throughout, especially with short form. It's unacceptable. Like short form, you're dead in the water if you're rambling because people click off you so quickly. YouTube, there it's a little bit okay if they're fans of you, but on TikTok, forget it. So even me, like how I prepared my 100, I recorded 100 TikToks in a day last week. So basically, what I did was I actually pre-wrote and practiced in my basement before I got to the shoot. I have a production team who does this for me now. But basically, it's like I have my recording here, and then I just time myself as I'm speaking. I'm rewriting the script to make sure it's perfect. So that's the second thing I would say. And then the third one, for those of you who haven't posted on social yet, I would encourage you not to even start with social if you're afraid. I would start with the 5 people you love the most. When was the last time you sent them a 20-second gratitude video message just saying how much you appreciate having them in your life? I would start there because it rewires your brain from thinking that video is a chore to video is a tool for impact.
Okay. Love that third piece. When you're posting on TikTok, do you have a framework that you use that you plug the information into when you create your short form scripts?
Right. So I'm happy to share, but one thing I want to caveat on, I haven't started posting on TikTok yet. So I don't have the creds to justify anything I'm about to say. So take it with a grain of salt. But from studying other people like I did with YouTube, to be the person I am today on YouTube, what I realized is what Alex Hormozy and a lot of these guys and gals are doing on TikTok is they always start their video with what's it about. So instead of going like, hey guys, I've been noticing last week that that's more indirect versus going, how to overcome your fear of communication. What I noticed is this. So it starts with what the video is about, so it reels people in, or by they say something like this, here's how to do this, and then they just say what the tip is. So that's the formula we follow, but we don't know what the results are going to be. I mean, my friends have all gotten great results, so I'm hoping I get the same results too, but that's the format. It's just what the video is about, one tip, because you don't really have time to say a lot, one tip why it's important, and reloop the video. So at the end, you might end your video with something like this, and then when the video ends, it reloops how to do this, and then it just kind of reloops. You're muted, by the way. Yeah.
So when is your TikTok debut?
We're planning for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So my best friend. My best friend's like my production team basically. He's producing all of my 100 pieces right now, and we should be good for November.
Oh, we're gonna have to keep up on that. What's your tag for TikTok? Just in case anybody that's listening wants to follow you.
I mean, honestly, you're better off following me on YouTube, but TikTok I got like 70 follows, but sure, I appreciate it, Brian. It's Master Your Talk because Master Talk isn't
Okay,
available.
cool.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, look, we've been kind of going in deep in quite a few different things, and this has just been such an incredible conversation. And I know how important time is, so I don't want to take up any more of your time here, man. So to wrap things up, as far as anybody listening, how can they, if they're interested in following you, if they're interested in learning more about you, where can they go? Other than
Yeah, for
TikTok?
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, other than TikTok. Yeah, thanks for the conversation, Brad. This is super fun. So, 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one is definitely the YouTube channel. Just go to Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And then number two is attending one of our free workshops on communication. Just go to rockstarcommunicator.com to register for our next one. And even if you're introverted and shy, you're more than welcome to jump on the workshop and turn off your camera and not talk. As long as you're working on yourself and you jump in and take notes, I'm happy with that too.
Excellent, Brenden. Well, I want to say once again, this has been a fantastic episode. I've truly enjoyed the conversation, and want to thank you once again for your time.
Likewise, brother. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one. Bye bye.